The year is 2023, and I'm playing a video game. The last time we talked about a game of this kind or caliber, I bared my soul to you, my viewing audience, about my restlessness and disquiet about my place in the world, feeling lost, feeling bored, if even by just myself, on the verge of a breakdown, truth be told. Crushed under the weight of dysphoria I only realized a scant few months prior I'd been carrying for so long. At the time of writing, I'm doing better. I'm healthier, and I've found kinship appreciating the lady in the mirror that was stuck in a well of internal darkness only a year before. It's been a long road to getting better, to feeling better, and it's given me the ability to take on new chapters, big and small. The year's 2023. I'm playing a video game. It's possible you might recognize the game, truth be told. I don't think it needs naming, but we're playing a 4-player cooperative FPS focused on crime and criminality. The moment-to-moment gameplay is a horde shooter of a sort, complete with the relatively flimsy AI we've come to expect from games of this kind. A healthy assortment of weapons, relatively linear missions, and a penchant for violence. We take the roles of heisters, tasked with amassing fortunes from big shots to keep to ourselves and expand our empire. And to do that often means we're busting into vaults, armored trucks, jewelry stores, the works. We have the ability to stealthily complete these missions, of course, to take down the cameras, down the civilians, to zip tie their arms together, subdue the guards to secure the valuables for ourselves. But in some respect, doing that feels relatively reductive given its reputation. Stealth is fiddly anyways, so unless you're on your best behavior, you will almost always be playing the game loud as hell, guns blazing as you tear through the cops like butter. The emergent gameplay in these small maps as waves arrive and conflict escalates with newer, stronger enemies arriving the longer we're there, give repeat playthroughs of the matches a modest amount of variety that keeps the game moving along. This FPS gunplay is interspersed with performing time-consuming tasks that will aid us in our robberies. For instance, in a bank job, we have to assemble a drill onto the vault door to destroy the tumblers in the lock, allowing the door to open so we can acquire all of the goodies within. This drill takes time, and it could jam, or be jammed by the cops and SWAT units shuffling through the doors, so we'll need to restart it. We get the vault open, but if we're playing single player, the AI teammates we have are unable to pick up loot on their own, so we have to grab a duffel bag full of cash on our own and throw it their way. And in trying to corral them to the getaway vehicle, their pathing could very well act up. They might stand before a group of enemies being riddled with bullets, and they will not respond other than letting their blood get splattered all across all nearby surfaces like they're auditioning for the special effects in a Kurosawa production. But how do we and our hapless AI pals even arrive here in the first place? I'm glad you asked. There is a large map of the city at our disposal, with icons popping up at random across the various districts, missions in progress created by other players, or new lobbies for you to pick up. Don't you worry if you're dissatisfied with the offerings on the table though, as you can pay a contract fee to have a mission of your choosing set up for you to play, complete with fine-tuning the difficulty. From there, you finalize your skills, your character selection, your arsenal, and you hit the road for a daring mission of financial reallocation. That's just one way to play the game, though. There are some other modes to pique your interest if just dropping into and out of disconnected lobbies playing random missions doesn't do it for you, such as a roguelite mode where you progress between missions. You get different perks piled up on you to turn the tables away from your favor, though you can fight back with your own additional perks to level up the odds and take on more and more missions. You also have smaller campaigns playable in co-op, sets of a few missions with a storyline that runs between them. They're all just variations on things you've already played, maybe a bank with a different layout or different tasks in a similar area, but giving them a thematic through-line does at least help the game feel more impactful. Completing them actually makes it feel like I've completed a story, not just picked a few missions to play. The game, though, isn't that great when you pull the curtain back and analyze just what's going on. It's a horde shooter, yeah, but it's not a very great one compared to its contemporaries. The game's performance isn't that great, its visuals are nothing to write home about, and the game is prone to glitches and bugs, especially when concerning the vehicles on offer, which might bounce around like a lowrider enthusiast looking to hand his life savings over to the guy who makes hydraulic suspension until the end of time, or even just completely clipping out of bounds because, well, game engines are like that sometimes, and sometimes edge cases aren't caught. But at the same time, we cannot pin this blame all on its developers. Game development is difficult work, things go wrong all the time, and money is king when it comes to making something, anything, halfway decent. And when your funds are split between celebrity cameos and paying executive salaries, you're left with not much to make a quality game. But often so many of your players will be unable to separate these events in their head. The game is bad, and the fact that the people making it might not have been paid well or had the time to polish it doesn't occur in some players' minds. They look at a buggy game with mediocre voice acting despite having an all-star cast and wonder just what went so wrong, even though having A-listers doesn't guarantee quality. They need to be directed well. They need to have their time valued and respected. They need direction. Of course, that money going to the executives, the board of directors, although suits far above the art and artistry of game development, is one of our core tenets under late-stage capitalism. More for me, and less for thee, if you catch my drift. And one of the executives here, a would-be rock star, who pushed forth into the VR space with confidence and charisma, a bro-macho guy, was mostly to blame for these issues. He had done this all before, you see. This attempt to become the go-to name in the tech sector, to become a name along the lines of Hideo Kojima or Shigeru Miyamoto, whose sole influence in this sector bled into the common pop cultural background radiation that surrounds us. A crusade to become the go-to name in commercial tech, signing deals with Hollywood studios based on massive franchises, crossing over with the stars that he loved, all while chasing the dragon that was his name in lights, the Elon Musk of VR, at a time where saying that was only a little cringeworthy. The story of this game is the story of one Bo Clint Anderson, one of the two founders of Grin back in 1997. While working on a Final Fantasy spin-off codenamed Fortress, the game's assets and funding were recalled by Square Enix due to the questionable quality of the product, which demolished the funding the brothers and their studio had at the time. Having released games of mild to moderate success like the Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter games and Bionic Commando Rearmed, many of the members would find stable footing in the upheaval. Might and Delight is a studio still to this day producing games with small budgets and cult followings, having successfully kickstarted the development of their latest title, Book of Travels, in 2019. Some of the engineers at Grid went on to develop the Bit Squid game engine, meant to be a lightweight and easy-to-use engine for rapid iteration, used in the production of games like Escape Dead Island and Warhammer Vermintide 2. The engine was rebranded to Autodesk Stingray in 2014 and sold as a low-cost alternative to Unity and Unreal during a time that offering a low-cost game engine wasn't the norm. And post-2017, it lives on as 3ds Max Interactive. Bertil Horberg became a solo developer and over the next decade and change released the Gunman Clive games. And our two founding brothers went on to form Overkill Software shortly after the collapse of Grin. With the aid of Sony Interactive, Payday the Heist released in 2011 to a devoted cult following and easily made its money back, allowing the studio to look into making a sequel. To do this, Overkill sought out the assistance of Starbreeze Studios, at the time struggling to keep the lights on while developing the cult classic indie title Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons. While on paper, Overkill became part of Starbreeze in 2012, the truth was that Bo Andersson, who at the time was a member of the board of directors at Varfter AB, an IT investment firm, used his connections to become the majority shareholder of Starbreeze and folded all of their assets into Overkill's Stockholm, Sweden office. And in 2013, shortly after the game's release, became the CEO of the entire company. This move and the release of this game launched Starbreeze into massive profits, and it was hard to doubt the moves its CEO was making as he turned a company struggling making mid-sized releases at best into a AAA-sized powerhouse that was fighting alongside Grand Theft Auto's online mode, whose finicky MMO-based gameplay and mission setup in the open Los Santos made Payday 2 the clear winner for so many players. A AAA title deserves the requisite accolades, and to help push the game into more hands, deals were made with celebrities all across the board. A stuntman with a decade of experience in the film scene and the original Thanos actor in the Marvel films, Damon Poitier, and Iranian-American film actor Eric Etebari headlined the game's launch, with Giancarlo Esposito, hot off the set of Breaking Bad and a celebrated actor in his own right, taking up the antagonistic role as the enigmatic dentist. A man whose front is an innocent chicken restaurant owner, dentist hid shady connections the world over, recruiting new members the entire way through, including an ever-growing cavalcade of celebrated actors including Keanu Reeves. A facsimile of Keanu Reeves. The recurring side character Jimmy from Hardcore Henry, portrayed by his actor Charlito Copley, and depictions of film characters like Bodhi from Point Break or Tony Montana from Scarface. In 2016, it was revealed that Ron Perlman was becoming the newest member of the cast, and in interviews following his arrival, it became clear that he did it just for a paycheck. He was received well by the studio, especially their CEO, but actually implementing him into the game was half-baked, and he was left mostly directionless, as his character in the game was kind of just the character he had previously portrayed on Sons of Anarchy. This was on top of the game having received a mission to advertise the Swedish house DJ Alesso, playing 2 of his tracks and being covered in his likeness at a time that he was being considered one of the best DJs in Sweden, if not the world. The game had become a vehicle for meeting big shots, and the guy at the helm was using his connections and sales to fund a massive project. It was called Storm, a mass-scale experiment combining virtual reality and augmented reality. Players wear Star VR headsets with massive fields of view and high resolutions, carry a computer in a backpack with them, and their laser blasters take the form of real weapons in their visors, with new environments mapped onto the arena set up by the vendor. Rather than using a single limited play space roughly 2 meters in size like conventional VR equipment, the entire environment would be playable, likely either through inside-out tracking or a large volume of IR lighthouses in the ceiling. This was being sold as the future of virtual reality, and needed a ludicrous amount of investment. Not just monetary, but also in terms of bodies, software, middleware. The Valhalla game engine, essentially just a prototype, was bought for 73 million krona just for being VR ready, when it wasn't ready for anything. Cinemaware, Druva Interactive, and other studios were required to expand the Starbreeze workhorse for the equivalent of millions of US dollars. IMAX took interest in the Star VR prototypes and partnered with Starbreeze to make IMAX-sized screens available in the home via virtual reality, with Starbreeze selling the film rights to Payday to IMAX at the same time. And while CEO Bo Andersson was big-wheeling using his investment firm to turn a game studio into his own personal wishmaker, their games suffered. Payday 2's quality was taking a turn for the worse, with players dissatisfied with the new missions, the redundant weapons, the samey levels. Raid World War II, a game whose only noteworthy gimmick was the addition of John Cleese, right on the cusp of becoming a curmudgeon, failed both critically and financially, and their Walking Dead game, announced in 2014, stumbled out the door 4 years later in a borderline unplayable state. Unfun, overcomplicated, and reusing assets from Payday 2 to make up for the fact that the game was made in roughly a year due to corporate incompetence. Skybound Publishing, who owns the rights to The Walking Dead, was dissatisfied with the quality of the game and rescinded the intellectual property rights, and the game shuttered. And the move that killed Grin was dead set on killing Overkill, and Starbreeze with it, taking a significant amount of collateral damage in the process. Bo Andersson was fired from his role as CEO by a unanimous vote of the board of directors after Overkill's The Walking Dead launched, and the following day he sent out a company-wide email. "I don't have a crystal ball," Bo told his team following the move, "but I do have the balls to make a vision and the will to create the future. Now lots of should-haves and would-haves pop up. To that I say, go build your own company, good luck to you." We all know the name of this game, and this is at Overkill level difficulty. I would like to point out that Overkill was the 4th in a set of 7 difficulties in Payday 2, putting it firmly in the middle. You were there with me, side by side, some of you for over 10 years. Payday. Wow, We turned that from an okay game to a super hit of the decade. It was an amazing achievement. I decided I will build amazing games again. Will you? Pushing hardware such as Star VR, Presence, and 3D engines has been exciting and challenging. Too early for the global trend, but boy, the VR headset is amazing. And who else built a VR park in Dubai? Bravo. Personally though, I lost all my money, my family in divorce, and my kids' custody through the toil over the last 2 or 3 years working 100-hour weeks for Starbreeze and keeping you devs paid and in the game. With less and less developers willing to put in the extra care in a product, it clearly limits the possible result of enough quality and time. Payday 3, my passion, my dream project, will most likely not involve me, and I leave that in your capable hands. I will heal, see my kids for the first time in 4 months, and then make enough cash to start over, and then, who knows? I might write a book about it all. Maybe we do this again. I will, in space. My storm is coming. On November 6th, 2018, Overkill's The Walking Dead released on Steam. 3 days later, the Star VR headset disappeared from store pages, and Acer worked to shut down or sell the company working on it internally. A week later, Bo Andersson sold his shares in Starbreeze, and another week later, the company declared a profit warning. Had Bo not sold his shares, his net worth would have been halved by this notice. 1 more week later, Swedish authorities raided the Starbreeze office in an investigation of insider trading. Bo Andersson was taken into custody, but released and cleared of charges after admitting his bank forced him to sell his shares at the time. Come 2019, Bo Andersson was nowhere to be seen. I want to return to talking about our game again. That one about 4 players committing crimes with drills and saws with timers on them. You know the one. The game with big-name celebrities and mistreated devs taking the blame. To see executives spend millions on a lackluster game just to hang out with the likes of Damon Potier is honestly saddening, disrespectful, and using it as a means to relive 90s nostalgia by including Vanilla Ice and Chuck Norris in the mix is just all the sadder. And I say that with confidence because it happened. It's real. Every detail is just about true. And the game we've been playing this entire time is Crime Boss Rockhay City. Released on the 23rd of March 2023, the game is Payday 2. The map with the pins, the drills and the saws, the armored transports and jewelry stores. Every last minutia in this video has not been about Payday 2, because we were never talking about Payday 2. In-game studios made this clone so its higher-ups could get to hang out with the A-listers of yesteryear, and that should come as no surprise when you look at their board of directors. Amid the names, you will find one deeply familiar name, one that instills disgust and fear all the same. One Bo Andersson Clint, who was born on January 1st and had been an investor in IT and interactive media for over a decade by this point, who joined the board at In-Game Studios in 2020, having successfully dodged the repercussions of his time at Starbreeze to turn up in the Czech Republic to do it again. Crime Boss Rockhay City isn't good. I do not need to talk about it any more than that because Crime Boss Rockhay City is a 2023 game that struggles to compete with a title released a decade prior. And that's not even because the latter game had a head start. Launch day Payday 2, Payday 2 on the PS3 or Xbox 360 or the Nintendo Switch is more robust, more complete, and a more gratifying package than Crime Boss. The gunplay is weak, the sound design is weak, the weapons are mostly fictitious without any regard for balancing them within themselves, leading to every top 10 list about the game's guns to hold the light machine gun, the machine gun, in a high regard because there's little reason to run anything else unless you outright require a more niche build, and because the weapon loadouts are paired to the characters, a very clear tier list can be made that proves there's a best way to play the game. You may recall that up until recently, its competing game had a similar problem with balance, where there was legitimately a right option if you wanted to play the game well, and this game falls into the same rut. Honestly, it falls into it harder. It'd matter more if there were more than a few levels. The map roster is sparse and meant to be made up with the Urban Legends mode, which is like the multi-day heists or the more recent seasonal stories Overkill has done. but with additional roguelike modifiers a la crime sprees in Payday 2. If you jump into Crime Time, not CrimeNet, Crime Time, it's legitimately called that, somebody put their name on it, you're playing the same few missions, feeling lost in a time loop not out of 90s nostalgia and criminality, but of 2013, thinking that the doubling of the mission count in Payday 2 was not worth the reduced scope of many of its missions. And the weakest part of this game is its characters. Poor delivery and minimal direction paired with a sloppy script led to a very inorganic line reading, especially from Sheriff Chuck Norris, played by...
Best of him.
He will be back.
Good for now.
Yes, now focus on the other chums.
Yes, sir.
Michael Caine. Norris, for a lack of a better term, is Hitler. From Raid World War II, gloating over your losses and being frustrated at your victories, and it just doesn't work. The game in general is misguided in its production and painfully sloppy in its execution, and more than one review feels that the cast of 90 superstars feels like an executive wanting to hang out with the celebs he looks up to, which we've seen before. The game becomes a vehicle for making connections. The actual quality of the game is irrelevant. This was about building an empire of handshakes at the deficit of the players. Now that's not to say that Crime Boss Rockay City is a complete ripoff. You can carry up to 3 duffel bags at a time. If nothing else, we just need to look at this resignation email that Bo sent to his staff at Starbreeze for proof of his blowhard arrogance. He talks up the Star VR, which would never come out, congratulates the team on opening the VR arcade of his dreams in Dubai. Note that they were in Sweden, not Dubai. Laments that he lost all of his money just before selling his copious amount of stock in the company, and groans over the 100-hour work weeks that developers told Eurogamer they worked while he vacationed or took time off to play games for inspiration. He then throws his staff under the bus for not working hard enough, as if they should have led themselves through a multi-million-dollar AAA game project, and then uses this email to tease them about Storm, that VR game he'd been wanting to make for a decade about PvE/VP space battles in a large environment, that laser tag with VR pack units costing over $1,000 each. Like, that's bound to be his magnum opus, and let the world forgive his sins. Bo Andersson carried himself with the ego and charisma of a superstar and hoped that enough legitimate celebrities would jump on board so he could cash in on their star power to keep bringing his overly ambitious and poorly thought out VR plans to reality. I don't mean this lightly when I say this, but Bo Andersson has proven himself the Elon Musk of VR. Willing to do anything for a quick buck and jolt of attention, the grunts in his way are just stepping stools, assets only valuable in climbing upwards, expendable outside of that. So many have tried and failed to claim a title from this chaos, this elusive metaverse to call their own. A conjoined world of people and digital assets that have intrinsic value pretty much to people who see shareholders as the only people with value. Bo Andersson is not part of this group. He sees its merits exclusively in gaming. At that point, I needed to know how VR Park in Dubai was doing. It's still open. In its intervening years, it's become known as PlayDXB and offers some non-virtual experiences, with MR Entertainment's website about the site showcasing bumper cars and some kind of drop tower VR thing. Yeah, they do still showcase VR experiences on their website, though what's actually being played, I have no idea. And the headsets don't look like Star VR. No doubt, part of Starbreeze's lengthy and costly reconstruction was pulling out of MR, leaving VR Park to its own devices, and no doubt dropping the Payday, John Wick, and... What do you mean there was an Overkill's The Walking Dead VR game in development? What? Okay, so we don't know how far along it was, but there's no way in hell that Bo thought that was gonna happen, right? They brought Overkill's The Walking Dead to the E3 show floor in 2018 and had to cancel one of its demos because nobody wanted to play it. The staff were furious with Bo's demands to make the game more like The Division, like Dying Light, like Far Cry or Assassin's Creed, and the staff were learning Unreal at the same time they were making a game that cost AAA tier money with the playability of a gachapon mobile game. Hell, the game's weapon system is a gachapon system. Rarer tiers of weapons have fewer weapon mod slots that are unusable, and there's a degradation system that means keeping a consistent roster of equipment was nigh impossible. The art team reduced to sitting on their hands as the diesel assets didn't need that many touch-ups for Valhalla and then Unreal, put a lot of care into their work. Everyone else tried. Like hell they tried. And it's clear that a lack of direction, a lack of insight, and a CEO that didn't fucking care was killing the game. There was no way this was going to make its way to the masses like that, in a VR space. Simply banking off of people recognizing The Walking Dead wasn't going to work. Walking Dead fatigue was setting in strong by 2018. The 9th season premiered right around the launch of Overkill's The Walking Dead, and it was the least watched season since the first. Less than 500,000 people in the series' core demographic were tuning into episodes. The ratings on IMDb were holding steady, but nobody was watching the series anymore. It was old hat. If anything, perhaps the most sickening claim to Bo's name is that he was an early adopter. The lab was just 2 years old when he put other people's money into MR's VR park, and just a scant 2 or 3 years later, every venture capitalist wanted their own slice of the VR pie. In a move antithetical to Bo, they wanted a future where VR is a productivity tool, not an entertainment medium. Instead of putting it on and playing Beat Saber, instead of going out to play fucking the Overkill's Walking Dead Outbreak or Payday the Heist VR, you'd put it on and join a Skype call. You'd invest in digital spaces with a currency that was backed by... Don't worry what it's backed by, it's backed, okay? You'd buy tokens and exchange them with other players for goods and services, and it was in full VR to further sell this immersive factor of this new oasis. Except Oasis, as it was sold to these investors in 2011's Ready Player One, sucks. And every other aspect had already been done in Second Life, which already dealt with figuring out issues in regards to a player economy when Verwox let people trade Linden dollars for Bitcoin to give virtual tokens real-world worth, which required shutting down third-party Linden exchanges because, as Robert Stokes pointed out in Information and Communications Technology Law, Issue 3, page 221, that's pretty much money laundering. Pitting Bo Andersson, who saw VR as a means to an end to make a bigger name for himself at the cost of others, versus this nebulous, shady metaverse investors trying to make VR chat with the fashion sense of control, and none of the spooky bullshit, it's not some David and Goliath story. There is no winner here. Let's face it. Nobody wins. Developers are burnt out for nothing, players get a shit product, money is sunk down the drain, and nobody learns anything. Everyone walks away simply more jaded, and this is distinctly one of the things that brings these two groups together. Bo Andersson is distinctly similar to his metaverse crones across the aisle. They're deeply charismatic egotists who see their personal vision of the future and will take any step to make it so. The story of Bo Andersson isn't the story of digital coin and land, but it's cut from the same cloth. Storm was his Epcot, his Decentraland, and just about his undoing. So, Starbreeze is left a wreck following Bo Andersson's leap from the company. The company he strong-armed the CEO title for, the company that he used to amass a team of creatives, of studios and investors, people he could sucker with sweet little lies about the VR scene, and then left the cleanup to the people he saw beneath him, the underlings. And none more scarred in the altercation than two of the most prevalent faces of Starbreeze, Almir Listo and his own brother, Ulf Andersson. Almir Listo was a producer at Overkill Software who had joined the team shortly after the launch of Payday the Heist. He's passionate about connecting the gaming community to its staff, appearing in publicity videos for their games, developer live streams, cast interviews, and accepting his mimetic status within the game's community. He enjoys seeing the gaming scene surrounding Payday enjoy his iconic and emblematic catchphrase. Heisters, there's a darkness approaching. Are you and your loved ones safe? That's his catchphrase, I swear. He said it before. Go back and... Anyways, being such a public face of the game, though, means that Almir faced a ton of blowback for bad moves made during Payday 2's time in the limelight, being confronted with the backlash from CrimeFest 2015 as well as the firestorm that surrounded Raid World War II and Overkill's The Walking Dead. The memes turn less jovial and more acidic, more personally scathing in these moments. People take their aggression out on the face of the studio. And Ulf, whose greatest sin was rewriting Diesel for Payday 2, working with David Goldfarb on the game's design, who, by the way, also fucking hated Bo Andersson, and playing one of its main characters, left Overkill just after spring break in 2015. Even after that, he still had to field questions from people who thought he cared more about this thing that was massacred and scarred. Perhaps he saw the writing on the wall. Perhaps GTFO was just beckoning to him. Perhaps he saw what his brother, his company, had become and needed to bow out before it got worse. Seeing the push early on to not bend to the microtransaction hell the gaming scene had become, caving way with the creation of the completely overkill pack. I don't know. I don't intend to bother a man currently chasing his dream all over again. He found his cult following, he's getting to make the kinds of games he enjoys, and he's still getting to work with the employees that made his work so great. And I feel like that's for the best. The late Michael Nermark stepped up and aided Starbreeze in their reconstruction, selling off most of their assets. System Shock 3, the sequel to the coveted cult classic ImSim, was sold to Otherside Entertainment. 10 Crowns was sold to Mohawk Games. Druva Interactive, a cinematics company, was sold to Rockstar and merged with their India studio. Psychonauts 2, the sequel to the beloved platformer, was sold to Microsoft. Digital Brothers was set to buy the company to eat their debts and become a majority shareholder in Starbreeze. Tobias Sjogren signed a €50 million publishing deal that secured the remainder of the funds for Payday 3, and Tobias became the permanent CEO of Starbreeze, Nermark passing away that October. And all the while, Bo had found new company and was now funding crime boss Rockay City, taking the time to talk up the celebrities on board and analyze his options, pave the way for his oncoming storm. Crime Boss released in March 2023 to middling reviews, and we wouldn't be talking about it if it weren't for how uncannily similar it is to Payday 2 and the Bo Andersson connection at hand. But yet, somehow, this story continues to grow. June 11th, 2023, the Xbox Showcase. Microsoft clears the stage for the first gameplay trailer for Payday 3. It looks an awful lot like the current state Payday 2 is in, except for, of course, way more polished and... Howdy, heisters. New bulldozer. The son of a bitch did it. The game looks good. I mean, mostly it just looks directed. Starbreeze has had direction of some kind making this game. The new features like the more in-depth physics, the guy falling off the roof, the hostage-taking, human shields, bulldozers getting to bulldoze, the cloaker being able to wall jump, enemies lining up behind shields to take cover. It looks superb. It looks worth playing. And at a $40 price tag, the same price as Crime Boss Rockay City, released just 6 months after that game, with an expected simultaneous launch on Steam and Epic at the very least, consoles if Starbreeze is truly done fucking around. Yeah, in-game studios, congratulations. There's no coming back from this one. Okay, so remember when Rayman Legends was delayed for the multi-platform release and it was then launched on the same day as Grand Theft Auto 5, or how Modern Warfare 3 and Cave Story 3D were simultaneous releases? Do you remember what won? Sometimes you get hit by things outside your control. And a game that was supposed to win doesn't. It gets demolished. Or games not meant to get competition, and they get it fast. Crime Boss Rockay City should have just faded into obscurity. A game with a 20-shot revolver and one machine gun just called The Machine Gun, starring Chuck Norris as the chief of police who smack talks you after you hit the pavement. A game with lacking multiplayer content and poorly thought out single-player content from a studio nobody's heard of could have just been an odd footnote on the Epic Games Store. In a manner not unlike The Devil's Third on Wii U, or Techland moving the cancelled Hellraid game to its own weird mode in Dying Light. But the fact that the impossible happened, that Payday 3 has thus far kept to its promises and is launching in 2023, only like a month after this video comes out, and so short after Crime Boss that they're in active competition, is terrifying. Sure, Overkill has stumbled since we last talked about Payday 2. Crime War came out after 7 years since being announced and is generally considered bad. Big surprise for being from the publisher of Smurf Match. The new weapon packs rely on gimmicks like a machine gun with a chainsaw grip, an underbarrel flamethrower, snipers in your secondary slot, or just a fucking metal storm as a gun that you can just have in a video game. And in general, the game has continued its trend forwards. We need to ask what Forwards is in this scenario. Almir Listo has been the front-facing individual in press releases and promotional videos for ages, and his enthusiasm, charm, and willingness to laugh with the community at themselves kept the game in people's minds even when a disastrous microtransaction launch, spurred by bolstering capital for some unknown storm on the horizon, should have collapsed the nucleus of its fandom. This community was vocal, and Almir was willing to push and pull this community with the aid of Starbreeze's staff should they want to. If you were a relatively big face in the game's community, it did not matter if you were just casually streaming the game. Its fans would be told via a news update, a push notification on Steam, that you were live and Overkill wanted you to march into that streamer's chat and inundate them with requisite livestream spam chatter, probably about the medic bag. But within the community, the cross-section of people who like games where you play with military equipment like toys, and people who liked arguing on the internet, was spurred on by a
community living in an echo chamber of hype, insulated from an objective reality. The community managers that were paid weren't paid enough, and the ones who weren't were bribed with merch and free DLC codes to not complain too much. For a game based on fighting law enforcement, it was stunning how much of the community was Blue Lives weirdos who held extremely strong opinions on guns, and also hated queer people.
I must admit these past few sentences were not my own, as you could probably tell, but rather those of Connor Shaw, otherwise known as Sherry. You might recognize that name if you peruse older Payday content. Sherry joined the conversation surrounding the game in 2016, and their time with the game came to an end with the game in 2018. But despite that, the vocal crowd turned toxic, and anger about not covering new events or doing new builds turned deeply personal, becoming homophobic, transphobic attacks towards someone who dared to play your video game for a couple years. Someone who dared to help you. The community, and the game thereof, has turned the direction of, we'll call it crypto-libertarian, a group of people who love shady black markets and dealings, hush money paid under the table for contraband, but without recourse. And it makes sense if you look at Payday 2 objectively. The game's crossover with John Wick doesn't end simply at a facsimile of Keanu Reeves that sounds like the generic soldier guy in Black Ops 2's multiplayer, but also includes the Continental Coin, a quasi-premium currency earned for each million experience or for completing special objectives that you can use to forego the random loot drops and acquire exactly what you need, be it new mask components, new gun parts, or a better armory for chains to stock in the virtual safe house. We acquire contraband, be it methamphetamine or themed marijuana holiday presents or fucking alien artifacts, and the people in our way? The US government, the PMC they paid off? Fuck them. We get to kill those government bastards and their over-regulating ways with all manners of illegal firearm up to and including man-portable miniguns, experimental microburst rifles, even the boring company flamethrower, Elon Musk's intentionally legally gray baby. The game, despite carrying an explicitly ACAB-ish message, has become the spawning ground for libertarian right-leaning players who feel their deeds deserve no retribution but wish to be the judge, jury, and executioner of their own one-man court system, to find comfort in turning the tables so heavily in your favor, all other competitors crumble before you. Are these the only people playing Payday 2? No, of course not. There's still good-hearted folk in the community, and the cartoonist who brought the game's characters to life in the seasonal event comics, Danny Engelsberger's Desmolus, is still around in trans themselves, having provided the actual proper clown costumes in the game. On top of meeting with a number of people who are trans and previously played the game, I'm trans and I previously played it. I burned my integrity so I could still occasionally enjoy the game, And I do when I'm not having to chat with people for an extended period of time about the meta. Having my name become mud in the community, having been forgotten by people who once pestered me in a time of grief, has given me peace about the past 6 years. But yet still the skeleton within the closet continues to rear its ugly head. And it's trying to talk to me about Web 3. With the reveal of Payday 3, I do see trouble on the horizon. The game has leaned into a Hobbes Leviathan-esque world, creating a despotist police state out of DC and giving us noble thieves playing to win big. It has given us a vast array of tools to pilfer gains ill-gotten and leave the vaults empty. We've helped a Republican rig an election in the past. We fought the Nephilim at the doorway to the Ark of the Watcher, to take on the ancient machine of the Kings of Kataru and prevent a black man from becoming president. And we did it with the Colt M4 to boot, or a flamethrower, or a minigun as heavy as our Heister, sprinting at Mach 3 into trouble with nary a care in the world. We are the Republican power fantasy, and when I see a new era of technical tools, when I see new sentries and gadgets, I can't help but worry if the game will fall into the pitfalls that the previous title did, if it will continue to cultivate this intrinsically toxic community that pushed so many others to different games, or keep trying to pull them back into this one despite protests, despite feeling unwelcome in a space that they had been in without incident for ages. And if it does go that way, September will be a truly unusual time, not just for me, but for all of us. This was never going to be two titans fighting. It was never going to be David versus Goliath. This was always a curb stomp between the penny pinching of Bo Andersson Clint being thrashed by the twisted visage of the company he corrupted. And I don't think anyone wins if this is the case. Still, despite that, during the final moments of Payday 2's story, a number of smaller studios opened up from former employees, much the same as what happened to Grin. Bounding Box Software, formed by Raid World War II level designer Jason Mojica and designer on Singularity and Super Lucky's Tale Michael Voller, created Proteus. Bearded Ladies Consulting went on to make Mutant Year Zero, Road to Eden, with Ulf Andersson being one of the stealth strategy game's leads. Ulf would later go on to found 10 Chambers and release GTFO, a survival horror co-op experience in which inmates in a maximum security prison are sent into infested nests to complete tasks for their overlords. Its oppressive atmosphere and heavy emphasis on teamwork helped it find a niche that keeps it afloat. Even Overkill, going on to the more tactically focused Payday 3, whose gameplay is more akin to the first game than the second, less arcadey with a greater emphasis on cover shooting, is shaping up to be, from a gameplay perspective, a superb return to form, provided they stick the landing. Truth be told, it seems that most everyone is doing alright. Except for Bo Andersson, who kept screwing over studios for his own personal gain, and only has a chain of substandard Payday varietals to show for it. He wanted to win big, but he hasn't even won at all. Even after the dust settles, even long after this battle starts and is called in the same breath, we still have but one minor issue on the docket, one last minute in the meeting to address. Storm, Bo Andersson's baby, his passion project. Originally on the Starbreeze website next to Overkill's The Walking Dead and Raid World War II, a next-generation VR experience complete with Star VR headsets, wireless gameplay with augmented reality weapons, in a location equal parts virtual and real. All the work Bo did to milk Starbreeze and their assets dry, all the schmoozing with celebrities and making dubious connections, his massive investment into VR Park at the Dubai Mall. It was all going to be worth it. One day. Play DXB. Its current branding still goes strong, though they seemingly have not received any money from Varvter AB in ages, let alone Fifi Holding or Digistrat, the other two holdings companies Bo Andersson is on the board for. They have been going great, with the arcade getting a 4.2 star rating on Google Maps. They offer a wide variety of games and experiences, and on their website, an image struck my eye. Sure, $136 is a lot of money to spend at Play DXB, but it'd be a lot of money anywhere. It's their most expensive package for a reason, after all. But these children, clad in VR headsets, hold plastic guns brought to them by the company Hologate, who offers a full, free-roaming hyper-reality experience called Hologate X. Headset and controller. No backpacks with computers in them, no cables. Even their basic experience, Hologate Arena, offers a 4v4 FPS mode called Samurai Arena. This is virtual reality laser tag. And this is, for all intents and purposes, exactly what Storm was meant to be. It's already existed, and the company who made it didn't need to demolish 2 whole studios to fund its success. All of Bo Andersson's fuss, all of these thrashed companies, all of this blown money, all of Starbreeze's heartache, and all of in-game studios' floundering was so Bo Andersson could show up late to a party he'd swore he'd be the focus of, having been outdone by a company that stayed on the straight and narrow, kept their head down, and didn't try to chase the dragon. I met a traveler from an antique land who said 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear: My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look upon my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away.